Joseph Cohen, founder of the Israel Advocacy Movement, is joining us here today to talk about anti-Semitism in the United Kingdom. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us. For people who might not be familiar with your work, what is the Israel Advocacy Movement? What is the crux of your work? Why was it founded?
So the Israel Advocacy Movement is very simple. It is all about doing everything we can to make tomorrow a better place for my children, for your children, for the Jewish people. Because today we face an existential threat. And I started the organization after I left another organization I founded called the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. And when the Gaza war in 2014 finished, the anti-Semites almost disappeared. But what persisted was, I don't hate Jews, I just hate Israelis. I don't hate Judaism, I just hate Zionism. And I realized this was the true battle. This was the acceptable face of anti-Semitism. Opposition to the existence of a Jewish state posed the greatest threat to Jewish survival, and it was the biggest center of anti-Semitism around the world. And so I launched the organization to combat that head-on, using social media, videos, etc., to do everything we can to do our part for the fight.
Well, that hatred is kind of exploded since October 7th. Do you still hold the same position that antagonism against Israel is the chief concern? Because a lot of diaspora Jews are facing a very tough battle about something that couldn't just be categorized as anti-Israel animus. It's anti-Semitism.
It's absolutely not. And I consider them to be the same thing. I consider anti-Zionism to be a form of anti-Semitism. But the reason that anti-Semitism has spiked in the way that it has is because of October the 7th and the aftermath. And it sets a snowball, and that snowball just rolling down a hill, and it gets bigger and bigger, picking up every single form of anti-Semitism, and every single anti-Semitic community clambers on board. So you have the far right getting involved. You have the Islamic fundamentalists getting involved. You have the far left getting everybody's bringing in traditional anti-Semitic tropes. They say it's about Israel, they say it's about Gaza, but then they start talking about the Talmud. So it's completely interwoven. But the catalyst, what's setting this ball in motion, is opposition to Jews living as free people. They potentially would tolerate us, potentially, if we're living under them, if we're living under an Islamic state, Western democracy, but they will not tolerate us as a free, independent people. So at least that's what I believe, and I believe that's why anti-Semitism has spiked. It is in direct relationship to the conflict that's going on here at the moment.
You spoke about a few different ideologies involved in anti-Semitism, and there's a bunch of different streams, and they all have their factional divisions as well. It's never just one canon of ideology that's coming after us. But in the UK, is it more of a left-wing from right-wing Islamist? What's the ideological framework under which a lot of the incidents are happening right now? Because we saw the Manchester synagogue attack was done by someone pledging allegiance to ISIS, and and the other not violent end of the spectrum we see in addition to the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign organizing marches every Sunday. It's also Stop the War, and you have Jeremy Corbyn being involved. So how would you characterize what's the engine that's creating anti-Semitism in the UK?
So there's a fragile alliance between the British Muslim community and the far left. And it's a fragile alliance because the only thing that really seems to unite them is, say, opposition to anti-Muslim discrimination, but also opposition to Israel as a state. And those two threats manifest in different ways in terms of how they impact the Jewish community. So the far left is far more likely to impact Jews at a societal, governmental level. And so that is a very real threat. But the threat that's posed by radical Islam and the wider Muslim community, truthfully, in the UK, is much more likely to manifest on the streets in person as public opinion. There's a huge Muslim community, and unfortunately it suffers from anti-Semitism, which is how I actually originally got into my work, was through Interfaith. I ran an initiative called Judaism Islam, which promoted the commonalities between our two religions in the hope that an awareness of how similar we are would breed tolerance of each other. And so that was how I first got into this work. But in gaining access to the British Muslim community, it quickly dawned on me that there's a huge problem of anti-Semitism within that community. And it's unsurprising because a huge percentage of them have come from countries that are deeply anti-Semitic. And so they brought those values and that hostility, and the British government has been completely unable to do anything to combat anti-Semitism. And so I think it manifests in different ways. I've been attacked by both communities physically in the work that I do, but the majority of violent assaults I've been subjected to have been coming from either British Muslims or Muslims that are here as tourists. And so, yeah, they both pose a very credible threat to the Jewish people, but in a very different way.
Can you tell us some of the threats, assaults that you've been subjected to?
So I've had knives pulled on me.
This is in London?
This is in London, not here. So I've had a knife pulled on me because I was wearing a jumper that said Zionist on it and wearing a kippah with tzitzit. I've been jumped on multiple occasions by gangs of Muslims in the UK. I do a lot of street advocacy, do a lot of interviews on the street, speaking to people, going to protests, going to places like Speaker's Corner, where people speak about whatever they want to do, but usually politics or religion. And on multiple occasions, I've been assaulted, usually by more than one people. It's usually a pack of people attack. And often I'm able to talk my way out of the situation. The police have been particularly useless in these instances. For instance, as I put a video up a couple of years ago, after October the 7th, where I'm at a park in London called Speaker's Corner in Hyde Park. And I'm having a conversation with a Muslim. It's a very positive conversation. We're discussing the conflict. We're trying to get to a peaceful resolution. How can we coexist? And a German Turkish Muslim starts cursing me in German, effing Juden, and the effing was in German. I had to Google what it meant. And
you mean for the classic anti-Semitism?
Yeah. And then there's a group of other Muslim youths who are there. You know what? We should beat him up. We're going to. And they all start screaming they're going to attack me. And so in the video I release, I then pan out, and you can see over my shoulder are two police officers just watching me being subject to horrendous anti-Semitic abuse and a gang of Muslim youth threatening to attack me. And meanwhile, the police are just standing there. There were other instances where a gang of Kurdish Muslims jumped me, and I'm quite shaken. There's a lot of them. There's one of me and my camera. And the policewoman, you can literally see her, like, turn away and run. And I don't blame her. She's a little policewoman. What is she gonna do against a gang of thugs? She needed more support, but she turned and ran. And I got the whole thing on camera. And so, the police are particularly in the UK. I mean, the police are the problem. I'll give you one of the most gross offences that I witnessed was someone filmed a jihadist on the streets of London at one of the protests. And he's waving a flag which we call the Black Standard. Now, the Black Standard is the flag that the Muslim army carries, the Khilafah, the Caliphate, when they're going into battle. And because of that, it was the choice flag of all the jihadist organizations. It's why ISIS have Muhammad seal, the black and white. Al-Qaeda have the same, and it's called what they print on these is called a Shahada, which is a declaration of faith. La ilaha illallah. There is no God but God. And it has a very specific meaning. The colours. And so this guy's waving it. And I shared the video, and then the Metropolitan Police, which is London's police force, commented on it. They responded to my tweet. Oh, what are the Met Police saying on my little tweet? And they replied underneath, "We've consulted with our flag experts." Okay, I didn't know the Met had flag experts, but this is interesting. And it turns out that this flag is just a declaration of faith. And so first, yes, that's true, but it's also the Black Standard. It's the flag that the army carries. But second, the guy who's waving it saying "Lanat al-Yahud," which means Allah's curse upon the Jews, and then he continues Allah's curses upon the kuffar, upon the non-Muslims, and then he screams "the Islamic State." And I'm like, so the flag expert who speaks Arabic and can recognize that this is the black standard, and it's the Shahada, must also be able to understand what this guy's saying. And the Metropolitan Police, instead of going after him, are defending this guy publicly. There was a huge backlash after this, and they had to then bring him in for questioning. But I doubt anything further happened. I'll give like the instances of the Crown Prosecution Service and the Metropolitan Police just failing the Jewish community miserably are so much vast in number. But one which I'll give you two examples, and this is not the police now, this is the Crown Prosecution Service. So it's the whole legal system in the UK is the problem. So in 2000, I think it was 2023, possibly 24, but after this October the 7th, a convoy of cars came down from Bradford from a Muslim community in the north of England. They drove hundreds of miles to London to a Jewish community. Why did they drive to the Jewish community? To drive through and announce on megaphones that they are going to do some of the most bestial, barbaric, savage things, evil things imaginable to our daughters and to our mothers. Jewish daughters, Jewish mothers. I won't say because I don't want to get... I don't know where
I'm
this...
sure everyone is familiar with it.
Yeah. And so why am I bringing this up? Well, that's a horrendous act of anti-Semitism. Well, the individuals in the car, there was 4 of them, they reached out to me by a Muslim I know that does a lot of interfaith, a lot of peace work, and he said they want to apologize to the Jewish community. Mm-hmm. Will you host them on your platform? And I said, no, I don't want to provide any cover for these guys. They've made their bed, they can lay in it. They chose to drive through our neighborhoods and threaten our women. They can face the courts. I should have took the interview. The reason I should have took the interview was the Crown Prosecution Service, despite knowing the license plate, the names of every single person in the car, decided they didn't have a case, and not one of them served jail time. A few weeks later, another thug, Islamist thug, came into my local supermarket, kosher supermarket, and he starts asking people, what do you think of Israel and Palestine? Are you Jewish? And then he pulls out a knife and starts trying to stab Jews. Thankfully, one of the heroic workers there gets a shopping cart and pushes it into him, and he's able to fend him off, and the police arrive, he's detained, he's arrested, and a few months later, he's spared jail. So the UK is in a place now where if a terrorist comes into a kosher supermarket and tries to stab Jews, he's literally carrying a knife this big, the whole thing's on video, everyone's seen the knife.
At least it wasn't a katana.
And it's because from the police force to the Crown Prosecution Service to even the government. So, for instance, you have these marches every weekend, the ones that I go to and film, right, and they're screaming victory to the Intifada, globalize the Intifada. Does the government clamp down on it? No, the Home Secretary takes part in it. Meanwhile, I turned up to many of them, and I'm told that my presence as a Jew there is antagonistic, it's provocative, and I need to leave. And so Britain is completely incapable of dealing with the threat that radical Islam poses with the Jewish community in their country.
So I guess the question is why the CPS and Met are acting in this manner. And the way you've described the approach of law enforcement towards you and saying, well, you're being antagonistic, this is something that we've seen repeated a few times with Gideon Falter back in, I think it was April. And now with the Maccabi situation, it's again, well, Maccabi's going to antagonize us, so we need to submit to the mob's veto and police instead of policing the belligerents. We police their victims so that they won't get in the way. Where does this mentality come from? Why is this happening, do you think?
It's different in different circumstances. So if you're at a protest, it's much easier to move a lone Jew than it is to defend a lone Jew against a screaming mob. I remember a few days after October the 7th, October the 7th was a religious holiday. The next day was still a religious holiday outside of Israel. And so the day after that, there was a big protest in Kensington outside the Israeli embassy. I turned up there just to film, and they realized I was Jewish, and they start the mob starts coming for me. I'm interfering with their celebration of the massacre. And in that instance, the police came to my defense. They formed a row around me and moved me into a restaurant, and they held the mob back. But that's a lot of police resources for one person, then they tried to get me out safely before I was attacked. But 9 times out of 10, it's easier for them to move me than the mob. So they got me out safely in that instance. There were no arrests or anything. The story made the Daily Mail, and then they had politicians getting involved and the High Commission getting involved. It's easier to control me in that situation than the mob. So I think that's one of the main excuses they use. But then there's these anomalies. There was before October the 7th, we had a solidarity rally. It was actually, I think, maybe being billed as a peace rally. And some thugs, again, turned up, some Islamist thugs turned up at that rally. And they go off on a march. A group of these thugs that were protesting our vigil or our solidarity rally broke away and start marching up a street. And they literally say, it's all on camera, we're going to find some Jews. We want their Zionist blood. We're going to get their blood. That's pretty offensive. But the offensive part of that is there's a police officer walking next to the guy as he's screaming they're looking for Jews and they're going to they want Zionist blood. And I think most of the time it's in a protest, it's easier to control a small group of Jews or an individual Jew. But then when you zoom out, I think there's also this absolute fear of being accused of racism. And so you had a situation this week where there was an individual at one of these protests, a Jewish individual, a lawyer, and he was wearing a Star of David, and he was told the Star of David was antagonistic, and that's why one of the reasons he'd been arrested was for being near people who don't like people that wear Stars of David wearing a Star of David. In that interview, you hear the police officer say, no, you can suddenly realize actually he could be accused of being racist now because he's a Jew. That's also a protected minority in the UK. And so you can hear there's a genuine fear in his voice, so he puts as an excuse and then continues the line of questioning that maybe your necklace is offensive to people that...
but racism is such like an issue there that or in their minds that it's not
at
the forefront of everything.
It's not the police, but at the Manchester Arena bombing at the Ariana Grande concert, one of the security guards did notice the terrorist and had genuine concerns, but was worried that if he approached him, he'd be accused of racism. So I think that is a huge aspect of it. The fear of being described as racist if you're going after Islamic extremism. I know complete unawareness as to what anti-Semitism is, the fact that an officer can sit in an interview room and question someone as to whether wearing a Star of David is antagonistic. I mean, yes, it is antagonistic to people that don't like Jews. The only person that will take offense to somebody wearing a Jewish symbol is somebody that doesn't like Jews. But the British police are so, and the Crown Prosecution Service are so concerned and worried about being perceived as racist that they'll fall into classical anti-Semitism without even realizing it.
Do you think that there's been any mark of change in the now, obviously, since October 7th, the Labour government has come into power, but for the Labour government, at least for Starmer's government, has there been any change in their trajectory? Because they just recently announced a large investment into security resources following the Manchester synagogue attack. They have Lord Mann saying that he's been tasked with looking into anti-Semitism in the NHS. Does this mark a change in their approach to this problem, or is this just meat being thrown to the crowd to distract it?
I think it's a distraction. Is my personal feeling. It's so institutionalized that it's going to take more than a little bit of budget to the CST or an investigation here, and I think the problem is so much bigger, so much deeper, so much so that I've took my family out of there. I have no faith, not just in this government, and it's at the governmental level and the institutional level, the police force, the Crown Prosecution Service. There almost needs to be a complete re-education as to what anti-Semitism is. How do you recognize it? How does it manifest? Because you can't have a situation where Jews are being told that their presence is antagonistic. Antagonistic to who? There's no talk of training courses or anything. It's just here's some window dressing to show that we think this is serious. To my knowledge, in the last 50 years, there hasn't been an anti-Semitic murder in the UK where, other than by somebody who's mentally unwell. We just experienced an anti-Semitic murder at Manchester Synagogue a few weeks ago. And you mentioned Maccabee, so there's the Maccabee fans were banned from the Aston Villa game.
Right.
The Home Secretary had foreknowledge of that. So this is after the Manchester stabbing, and it's because the government is not one cohesive unit. It's made up of many parties with competing factions, and I can't think of another country actually where this is the case, but there are members of parliament that were elected solely on an anti-Israel platform. Now, you have to stop and think. So you can get caught. I live in Israel, so Israel's obviously fundamental to my existence, my identity, etc.
Right.
But if you're an Englishman living in a village in the north, in Northumberland or Bradford or wherever you may well be, why on earth do you care about a conflict 2,000 miles away? It's got nothing to do with your existence. And the fact that politicians are getting elected on a solely, I think there were 9 politicians elected at the last elections, and their platform was nothing but anti-Zionism. And that's scary because it's not. It's very easy to go after. Okay, Jeremy Corbyn will put out a message saying the Manchester stabbing was horrendous. He's right. It was horrendous. That's the easy anti-Semitism to speak about. It's easy to speak against Nazis. It's easy to speak against actual murder, but it's the banning of fans of an Israeli football team. It's the inability to prosecute those that carry out where someone isn't killed but carry out anti-Semitic attacks against the Jewish people, and this is what isn't being dealt with. And so this, I believe, is the real problem. Anti-Semitism is institutionalized in the UK.
And is that what's led you to make Aliyah? Why you put yourself in a lot of dangerous situations? You've been through a lot. What was the final straw? Why did you leave the UK?
Truthfully, there's 2 answers to this, and I'll start with one which I hadn't mentioned. A few days after October the 7th, I went back to my day job. I worked in tech at the time, and I'm broken inside. The Jewish people are still coming to terms with literally witnessing. We all watched the videos of the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. And I logged into Zoom, and with all my rest of my team, and they're all joking and laughing, and it's just a Thursday. And why shouldn't it be? For them, it's nothing. In the sense that if there's a massacre in Kenya, like I read about it, it's horrible, but then I'll go out and I'll joke with my friends and I'll just go about my normal existence. And I'd never felt like such an alien in my own country that I wanted to be with my people. And I have a great relationship with my colleagues, total respect for them, but I just didn't feel like I belonged there in that moment. And so going through that trauma, I realized that for thousands of years, 2,000 years, our ancestors have prayed and dreamed of living in this land, and I have the opportunity to. And so it would be foolish not to capitalize on that opportunity and at least try to live in this country. The second side was, not a day goes by when I don't get a death threat from a British anti-Semite. And I've had violent attacks, I've had verbal attacks, and I looked at what the police were doing, what the Crown Prosecution Service were doing, and I thought the writing's on the wall. It's only a matter of time before something happens. And tragically, something did happen. It was Manchester. And I don't think Manchester is going to be the last incident. I think there will be more. And it's because the government, the institutions, are not capable of dealing with the threat that radical Islam poses. The UK has welcomed in millions of migrants from the Muslim world. Many of them come from countries that are deeply anti-Semitic, and they haven't done anything to tackle that problem. And that problem will only get worse because immigration isn't slowing in the UK. More and more people are moving there every year, and many of those people have hostile views to Jews. And so, just to really put that in context, they're coming from countries that used to have very large Jewish communities. And when those governments adopted anti-Zionist policies, the outcome was the Jews were either forced to flee or they were pushed out by the state itself. And I think Britain is on a trajectory to that same outcome. And so I wanted to get ahead of the curve and moved to a place where I felt that the police, the government, have my family's interests at heart, will actually do everything they can to eliminate bigotry. And so that's the two key reasons I came here.
Is there a future for Jews in the UK, to put it bluntly?
I'd be worried about I have children, and I'm worried about their future there. I think my generation will be fine, but unless something changes, I'm not sure. And I'd rather not stick around, particularly for my children. I don't want to set them up to exist in a country which is growing increasingly hostile, when they can grow up in a country where there are incredible opportunities. I'll give you an example. After the Manchester attack, there was an attack a few meters away from my house, a terror attack here, and I was speaking to my father and I said, look, wherever we live, we face a threat. Whether in America, whether we're in the UK, there are people that want to harm us. But I would rather be living in the nation where the police and the military is set up to do everything they can to prevent that.
If you had to give a message to every British Jew, you got a super microphone that allowed you to speak to everyone at once, what would your message then be?
Okay, I hate to say this, but the writing's on the wall. The streets are already soaked with Jewish blood. Leave while you still can.
It's not a very optimistic message.
An optimistic message would be, there is a nation which your ancestors have yearned to live in, and today it's thriving. It's diverse. There are incredible opportunities. It's a difficult country to live in. We're learning the language. We're having to learn how to grown up again. But the quality of life here in Israel is incomparable to the UK. So the positive message would be, there's an incredible country here waiting for you, where you can not just watch Jewish history pass you by, but play an active role in the course of Jewish history. You can shape Jewish history, and you can move to Israel. That would be a positive one.
That's a positive one. Another possibly positive point, and it's going to be my last question. A lot of your videos right now, you're engaging in dialogue with people, and often they start to question some of their radical ways. In the past, you've also worked with Jewish Muslim relations. Are you seeing any potentiality for engaging with the other side? Have you seen a trend possibly in how you've engaged with people that offers perhaps a path that other people can follow in engaging in interfaith dialogue?
So the best analogy that I can make is Christians. So 500 years ago, if we were to speak to our great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents and tell them, in 500 years' time, the closest friends of the Jewish people are going to be Christians, they'd look at you like you were insane. Because back then Christians were ripping the flesh from our bodies, they were burning us at stakes, they were expelling us from their lands. And today, nobody supports us more, and that support comes from a theological interpretation. The interpretation that actually came from the UK. It was actually a stream of British Protestantism which really planted the seeds of Christian Zionism, and as a consequence it was taken to America, and from America you have this incredible relationship between the people of Israel, the nation of Israel, and the Christians, and they believe those that stand with the Jews will be blessed and those that curse the Jews will be cursed. And that's the big motivation behind that, and I think it's a very wholesome relationship that we have with them. The same is true for Islam. There is a theological Zionist undercurrent to the Quran which most Muslims are not aware of. There are particular ayat, it's called a verse from various various chapters. So for instance, in one of the verses it says, which means it's Moses speaking to the children of Israel. He says, "O my people, enter the Holy Land, Israel, that Allah, God, has assigned, written to you. And so there in the Quran, you have a theological reason to coexist with Jews in this land. And I think Muslims are in a situation where they're coming to terms with the fact that Israel is here to stay. And many are then looking to the Quran and saying, actually, there's precedent to support Jews here, not at the expense of any Arabs living here, at the expense of Muslims, but just Jews living in this land is not an unnatural thing from an Islamic theological perspective. And so millions and millions of Muslims watch my videos. And I actually get way more comments from Muslims saying that I've changed their mind, I've changed their perspective, or they agree with me than I get death threats. I get very few, I get maybe a death threat a day, but I get dozens of messages every day, probably hundreds, but I can't read them all, from Muslims saying that they agree, they like my message. And so while I'm speaking out against anti-Semitism in the Muslim community, my issue isn't with Islam or Muslims as a collective. My issue is with this very specific problem. Holocaust denial is far more likely to exist in the Muslim community. Anti-Semitic tropes, when you read any of the ADL pollings, it's much more likely to exist in the Muslim community. The most anti-Semitic countries in the world and places are Muslim communities. And that's why I do the work that I do, is I want to speak to those Muslims, most of whom have never met a Jew, never spoken to a Jew, and try to challenge some of their misconceptions about us. And I think it's quite successful. Even if it was 5% successful, 5% of millions is making a meaningful difference in the world. So that's why I do what I do, and that's why I speak to the people I speak to.
Do you think that can be replicated in the UK, creating dialogue with UK Muslims as well?
So I do. I'm bringing UK Muslims to Israel. I meet with Muslims from the UK here regularly, and I've spoken to thousands and thousands of Muslims in the UK over my time, and I absolutely think it can. But the problem is much, much bigger. The problem is it's not a guy on YouTube or a collective, small number of Jews and Muslims coming together and doing a little bit of interfaith work. The problem I'm discussing here today is institutional. It's what do you do when you welcome millions of people to your country, who a sizable section of have hostile views of another protected minority in that country. And I think that's a problem for the government to fix. And I don't think the British government and its institutions are capable of dealing with that, or at least they don't appear to be. And that's why I'm calling out that. Whereas on an individual level, absolutely, British Jews and Muslims should be talking, should be looking at each other's scripture, should be finding ways to coexist and come to terms with the existence of each other, be it in England or be it here in Israel. So yeah, I do think it can be replicated.
All right. Well, just hopefully it will replicate at the far more institutional level, and the future of the UK will be brighter. But in the meantime, thank you for taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you for having me.